John here from Great Lakes Country, and today we're going to be making the most amazing smoked Kalua style pork sandwiches. Hawaiian Kalua pork, not to be confused with the viscous liqueur you might make a cocktail out of, involves taking some pork, salting it, and cooking it for quite a long time until it's tender and shreddy and amazing. Now, the traditional method for Kalua pork that goes way back into the history of Hawaii involves taking an entire hog and burying it in leaves in the sand and then loading hot coals all over top and letting it cook for like an entire day or two. Then dig the pig back up and enjoy the pork. Well, there's a lot of home versions of that don't involve digging a great big hole or getting an entire hog, and we're going to be doing sort of a barbecue spin on that. Then we're going to be taking that meat and turning it into some wonderful pulled pork sandwiches. So I've also got to whip up a little Hawaiian-inspired slaw, as well as an extremely tasty roasted pineapple sauce to drizzle on top. There's a lot to do, so let's get right into it and take a look at the pork we're going to be cooking today. And here is the great big piece of pork that we're gonna be cooking today. And this right here is a pretty ordinary pork shoulder, bone in, and there's really only a couple things we need to do to get this thing ready. The way we're doing this today is essentially kind of like a standard pulled pork, which is a relatively easy thing to make on a smoker. This right here is a pretty nice looking pork shoulder. It's got a pretty decent fat cap on it, which is something we're looking for if we're doing something like pulled pork. But I'll start by going around and looking for any especially dangly bits like this that I don't necessarily want in there. Looks like there might be just a tiny bit of the gland still stuck to this chunk right here, so it's a no-brainer that I'm gonna get that right out of there. Anything that I think might get too crisp or burnt up, we're just gonna smooth that out a little bit. I'm seeing this kind of weird hunk of bone sticking off the side, which is sort of unusual for the pork shoulders that I buy. Don't know that it's really gonna hurt anything, but it's kind of bugging me, so I think I'm gonna slice that little piece right off of there too. Yeah, I don't know what that was. A little miscalculation with the bandsaw at the butcher shop or meat processing plant or whatever. The rest of this thing's looking pretty good. It's kind of hard to go wrong with a pork shoulder when you're smoking it low and slow. So the only other thing I really need to do is get it seasoned. And with the Kalua style pork like this, there's really only one seasoning, and that's some of this red Hawaiian sea salt, also called Alea red salt. Alea? I'm not sure how to say that word. Anyway, this salt is pretty special to Hawaii specifically. It comes from the rich red clay nature of the, well, I guess wherever they harvest this salt from. But anyway, it's got a unique flavor. It's very classic and traditional to a Hawaiian style pork. So we're just gonna get this thing seasoned all over pretty generously with this red sea salt. This is where it differs quite a bit from a ordinary barbecue pulled pork that we might ordinarily make, which calls for other seasonings like pepper and garlic and sugars and things like that. All we're putting on at this point is the salt. And I'm gonna sprinkle on about as much as I think will stick to this pork shoulder. That's looking pretty good to me, and if you're interested in taking a look at this package of the sea salt that I'm using here, I'll put a link to it in the video description below. You can check it out for yourself. Anyway, shoulder's all seasoned up, so now we just need to get it on the smoker. And for our cook today, we're gonna be using the Oklahoma Joe Canyon Combo Offset. This is my real little offset smoker that I use for a lot of my cooks. And as always, we'll start by getting a chimney full of some good lump hardwood charcoal lit up. And when that's good and hot, into the firebox it goes, along with a little hardwood split. Today, I'm using apple wood, which actually came from an apple tree that fell not 40 yards from here. Anyway, it's gonna work great for some pork. So I'll get my vents wide open, let that smoker start coming up to temperature, and what we're looking for is to get it to between 300 and 325 degrees, which is where we're gonna keep it for the next many hours. So with this smoker cruising along right between 300 and 325 degrees, on goes our pork shoulder. And I'm gonna be doing this fat cap side up as always. And I'll put it on the side of the smoker, pretty much as far away from the firebox as possible, because again, this is a very small offset. I don't want to get too close to that flame. The bone in this thing is kind of facing this side, so I'll put that part pointing towards the fire as well. Just give us a little bit more protection. And lastly, I'll go ahead and get my little wireless thermometer probe here in place, just stuck into some part of this pork shoulder so I can keep an eye on the temperature in real time. It also give me another point of reference for the temp inside of the smoker because it's kind of a multi-use thermometer like that. Anyway, we're closing the lid. And now we just have to let it cook away for the next few hours. I'm gonna do my best to maintain that temperature as close to that 300 to 325 range as possible. And we're just gonna let it go until the internal temp of that shoulder hits about 165. And at that point, we can move on to the next step. So we'll check back in on this shoulder in a little while, but in the meantime, we gotta do a couple other things like make a slaw and make our roasted pineapple sauce. And the Kalua pork sandwiches we're gonna be making today have a Hawaiian style slaw component. So let's make that now. We need to start with, of course, some shredded cabbage. So we'll start by chopping up some ordinary green cabbage. I wanna slice this about as thin as I possibly can because I like a pretty fine shredded cabbage in my slaw, especially if it's going on a sandwich. And we need what I'll call about 3 cups of that finely shredded green cabbage. And then we'll do the same with some beautiful red cabbage. You could certainly just go all green cabbage if you don't feel like buying 2 different kinds, but I sure like that color combination and I think it just adds a little something extra to the flavor. Anyway, we need about 2 cups of the red cabbage for a total of 5 cups of finely shredded cabbage altogether. Next, we need a 1/2 cup of some julienne or shredded carrots, and these I just bought from the store already julienned. And finally, some green onions, about 5 of them. And what we're gonna do with these is just cut off the white ends, cut the green parts in half, and then we're just gonna chop these long ways, as thin as possible. Now let's make the slaw dressing, starting with a 1/2 cup of mayo, 1/4 cup rice wine vinegar, 2 tablespoons soy sauce, 2 tablespoons lime juice, and about 2 tablespoons of some honey. Get all that thoroughly whisked together. Now we got all our vegetables chopped, our dressing is done, so let's put together this slaw. So into a great big bowl goes the green cabbage, the red cabbage, carrot, and the green onion. Get all of that tossed together a little bit. And then we add the dressing. I'll start by adding most of it, but I'll reserve a little bit left in the bowl just in case, and get that tossed in. You know, for a slaw that's destined to be piled on top of a sandwich, I don't want it especially soaking wet, especially since that pork is gonna be super juicy and we've still got a sauce that tops the whole thing off. So I'll just add about as much as I think will coat all of the vegetables nicely. But anyway, for now, I think our slaw is looking beautiful. It smells really good. Now I'm just gonna cover this bowl up, throw it in the fridge for a little while, well, pretty much until we're ready for it. Now let's make our delicious roasted pineapple sauce. And of course, the first thing we need is some pineapple. Next up, we need a little sweet onion. All right, we got about 4 slices of some sweet onion, 4 slices of that pineapple, and now we're just gonna give all of these little slices a light brushing with some olive oil, because the next thing we have to do is grill these off. Alternatively, I could roast them in the oven, but this is a barbecue video, so why wouldn't I do this step on the grill? So on the grill go our pineapple rings and our onion rings. And I've just got the heat turned to pretty low. I'm just gonna let these rings grill away for a little while till they get some beautiful char on them. Don't wanna burn them, but I do want them a little bit charred up, nice and softened. I'll give them a flip a couple of different times. Once they're looking beautiful and they're feeling tender, I'll pull them back out of there. Now I'll just let these grilled pineapple and onion rings sit out here on the counter for a little while until they cool down, basically to room temperature, because I don't want them hot when I start mixing them with the other ingredients. All right, let's make this sauce. And it pretty much just involves throwing a bunch of stuff into a blender. First, all those pineapple rings and the grilled onion. followed by a little fresh cilantro. This would work out to be about, I don't know, 4 or 5 teaspoons if finely chopped. Next, about 6 garlic cloves, 2/3 of a cup pineapple juice, half a cup rice wine vinegar, pinch of salt. I'll just use a little bit of that Red Sea Salt. Let's call that 1/4 teaspoon. And about a tablespoon of some sriracha. Something like that. Now the lid goes on and we blend on high speed until everything's absolutely pureed. That's looking pretty, but now we can taste and adjust for seasoning. That is really tasty, but I think it could use 2 things. First, just a little bit more salt, maybe 1.5 more pinches. And it's really tasty, but it's pretty tart from all that pineapple and the rice wine vinegar. We've already got a lot of tartness in that slaw, so I think I want to balance the tartness of the sauce out with a little bit of white sugar. Let's call that a teaspoon. Wow, now I'd say that's just about perfect. Not too thick, not too thin. Of course, if you wanted a more creamy, spreadable kind of a sauce, you could certainly throw in some mayo into that as well. Thicken it up, give it a little bit more body. But this, I'm thinking this is looking awfully good to me and is gonna be great on my Kalua pork sandwiches. Now I got that roasted pineapple sauce transferred into a little squeezy bottle and we're ready to go. Now let's go back out to the smoker and check on that pork. All right, this pork shoulder's been smoking away for about 3.5 hours, and our internal temp is right at about 163. So I'm pulling it out and we're going on to the next step of this cook. Now, the next part of this cook involves taking that pork shoulder out of the smoker and then wrapping it up in some great big banana leaves. And then that whole thing is going into a cooking vessel of some sort, and it's going to be essentially baked the rest of the way until we reach our final temperature of about 203 degrees internal. Now, I'll mention that the truly authentic, traditional Hawaiian way to do this would be to actually use something called tea leaves, not TEA leaves, but it's spelled TI. But I simply have no way of procuring any real tea leaves like that. But in the mainland US, you can somewhat readily get your hands on banana leaves. And I was able to buy some and have them delivered to me way out here. They're pretty decent and green and relatively fresh, but they're just a little bit on the brittle side. So they've broken into a couple of different pieces. I've really only got 2 relatively long segments of the leaves, but that's really all I need for this next step. Now, you can apparently find banana leaves at various types of Asian and Central American and even Mexican grocery stores. But if you're like me and it's really gonna work a lot better if they can be delivered, I will put a link in the video description below if you wanna take a look at the exact ones that I bought and used. All right, let's get this beautiful pork shoulder wrapped up in some banana leaves. Get that temperature probe out of there. And I really want to make sure I remember which side is facing up because I want that fat cap to remain on top when we do the next part of the cook. So let me see if I can get this carefully wrapped up. A couple of these banana leaves, they're a little bit brittle at this point and I don't want them falling apart. I've read that you can steam them, make them a little more pliable, but I just don't know exactly how I would go about steaming them. I'm sure I could figure something out, but I think we're just gonna make this work. So let me get another leaf laid out here. And this is about the only one in the package that came completely in one length. Wishing there was a few more, but we're gonna make this work. You know, there's not gonna be a way to get this absolutely cinched tight without completely breaking all these leaves. We're just gonna do the best we can. Now, a big reason for these leaves in the traditional way of cooking this is to really help keep all of the steam and heat and everything inside of it. We don't have to worry quite as much about that because of what we're going to be putting this whole thing into. So these leaves are mostly going to play a role in developing the flavor. And that's because we're going to be putting the whole thing into my great big cast iron Dutch oven. And I'm pretty sure this is gonna fit. I might have to do a little bit of massaging to get it all in there. Going with my largest Dutch oven was definitely the right move. Now, simply enough, I'm just gonna put the lid back on. Oh, and before I forget, I better stick my little temperature probe back in there somehow. Okay, so our pork shoulder is wrapped in the banana leaves. I've got it in my great big Lodge cast iron Dutch oven. Now, how do we cook it? Well, there's a couple options. One, I could take this whole giant thing and stick it in the oven in the house and cook it the rest of the way. No more smoke's gonna get on it at this point, so that doesn't really matter. It's all enclosed in the Dutch oven. Or I could use it as a Dutch oven like this was intended to be used and load it up with some hot coals and cook it that way. But you know, since I've already got the smoker fired up and cooking along, I might as well just stick this whole thing back in the smoker and essentially bake it in that thing. So that's what I'm gonna do. So I'll get this big old thing stuck in there any which way I can. I'm gonna kick the heat up a little bit hotter to about 350 to 370 degrees and just leave it alone. Just let it cook away. The pork wrapped in those leaves are essentially going to braise, but also steam and get that banana leaf flavor sort of infused into the pork. The Dutch oven's well sealed. It's gonna keep all the heat in, all the steam, of course, all the juices. And the goal is when we pull this thing back out, when it hits an internal temp of like 203 degrees, it's gonna be fall apart tender, perfectly shreddable, and amazing. Okay, Dutch oven is out of the smoker. The internal temperature of the pork shoulder is right at 203 degrees. And now I'm gonna let it rest for a little while. I'm gonna leave this right here, not gonna mess with it, not gonna take the lid off. I'm gonna let it just sit here for 45 to 60 minutes. It'll come down to a better eating temperature, and then finally we can get into this thing, give that pork a taste, make me a beautiful sandwich out of it, and, well, feast. All right, the wait's over. Let's get into this Dutch oven and see what we're dealing with. Wow, right away, I can tell you the smell coming out of here is incredible. There's just this sweetness to it from those banana leaves. So let's peel these out of the way and take a look at our pork. Wow, look at that. That is a sight to behold. There's a lot of juice still in this, and I'm not upset about that because I'm just gonna shred and mix all that right back into this pork when I start shredding it up. First things first, of course, let's see if we can get that bone right out of there. That's what I like to see. You know, for a pork shoulder that didn't have any kind of pepper or paprika or sugar or anything except just salt, I still got an awfully nice looking crust and bark on that thing. Now, we just got to get it shredded up. And that is just as ridiculously tender as I'd want it to be. Just like any good pulled pork. No effort at all to just squish and shred this apart. I gotta tell you, this is still awfully hot. I'm glad I'm wearing the insulated gloves under these nitrile gloves. And I love some freshly smoked pulled pork. All right, I've been waiting long enough. I need to have me a little sample. Wow, for pork that's got nothing on it but salt and banana leaves, there's just so much flavor in there. You know, in learning about cooking with banana leaves, I've heard people say that it imparts a sort of grassy or even earthy flavor to the meat or whatever it is that you're cooking in it. But I don't really know that I would describe the flavor as grassy or earthy. It's definitely got a little something, a little sweetness to it, something that I'd probably never be able to identify if I didn't happen to know that it came from banana leaves. But those leaves really did impart a pleasant flavor and aroma to this batch of pulled pork. And it's a little surprising how much flavor there is considering none of the leaves are in this pork. It just was wrapped around it and sort of leached out whatever flavors it could to the outside of that pork shoulder. But man, it's good. And I'm a big fan of what I got going on here. But the mission today was to make some Kalua style pork sandwiches. So enough messing around. I gotta make one. All right, let's make a sandwich. We'll start with a nicely toasted sweet Hawaiian style bun. And we'll get a generous pile of some of that Kalua pork. Probably about however much I think will stay on this bun. Next, we need a little of that beautiful slaw. Look how pretty that is. I just love the color of that. And finally, a little squirt of our roasted pineapple sauce. And there we have our completed Kalua style pulled pork sandwich in all its glory. And I gotta say, I am really excited to try this out. All right, let's get into this. I am so ready. Wow. Wow, that is so good. I'll be honest, I was just a little bit worried earlier when I tasted that slaw and that sauce. Both have a little bit of tartness to them. And I thought maybe just a little too much. Is it going to overpower the flavor of the pork? Is there too much of that bright, acidic, tart kind of flavor going on? But I gotta say, once I loaded it up on a big pile of some pretty fatty, salty pork, wow, it balances out beautifully. And in fact, that tartness, that acid is pretty welcome to cut through the otherwise kind of fatty pork that's in this sandwich. Not that I didn't thoroughly enjoy that fatty pork all by itself, but the slaw and that sauce really just really takes it to a place that I'm pretty happy about. I gotta have another one. And I say it all the time, you gotta toast your buns. Using some kind of butter or fat is gonna be your best bet, but even if you just toast it dry, you create a little protective layer on that otherwise very absorbent bun. And when you're doing something like juicy meats and a slaw with dressing on it, and then a sauce on top of all that, that toast is going to provide some much needed structural integrity to that bun. So the whole thing doesn't get completely soggy or fall apart before you've even started eating it. But I digress. And by the way, I know not everybody has one of those great big cast iron Dutch ovens, and that's okay. If you want to do it just the way I did it here, you are going to need some kind of large vessel to put that pork shoulder wrapped in the leaves into. Something like a big turkey roasting pan that has a lid would work great, or a full-size hotel pan that you can seal very tightly with some aluminum foil. Whatever you got that's oven safe, that'll fit the whole thing, and that you can close up is all you really need. So that's about it. I'm extremely happy with how this Kalua pork came out, and I'm definitely going to be making it again like this sometime in the future. And as always, if you want to see the full written out recipe for everything I've made here today, I will put a link in the video description below. And I'll also put links down there to a couple of the things I used, such as that red Hawaiian salt and those banana leaves. In the meantime, be sure to like and subscribe and stay up to date with all our latest stuff, including future barbecue videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm John, and this is Great Lakes Country.